Good evening and welcome to the open house for the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment applications for 9 Windward Drive. Niagara Region and Grimsby are situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations such as the Hattaway, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The regional municipality of Niagara and the town of Grimsby stand with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. The basic premise of this open house is to provide the opportunity for the public to provide input on the proposed application. I would like to stress that there have been no decisions or recommendations made by council or planning staff on these applications. To ensure a fair process, members of council are to hear public input but not to engage in debate about the merits of the application. Opinions on the application should not be made at this time. Members will have the opportunity to express all their all their views and concerns when the final staff report and recommendation comes forward. A subsequent public meeting will be held at a later date in accordance with the requirements of the Planning Act, and public engagement will be welcome then as well. This meeting is conducted in accordance with the town's procedural bylaw. All participants are asked to conduct themselves with decorum and respect and provide the opportunity for all members of the public to express their opinion in an environment of tolerance on all points of view and free of intimidation. The intent is to create a venue to encourage people to participate in the process and provide their input. With us this evening are Oz Kamal and Stacy Kuriskowski from MHBC Planning, Justin Lemieux Real and Anthony Real from Rielson Tealco Incorporated, Aaron Wignall from CF Crozier, and Magnus Clark from Paradigm. Planning and staff in attendance, Riley McKnight, planner, and Walter Basic, Assistant Director of Planning. Tonight we will start with staff providing a brief presentation outlining the process and the application. Next, the applicant team will provide an overview of the proposal, and that will be followed by an opportunity for you to ask questions. If you have not already done so, please ensure you have signed in so you will be informed of future meetings on this proposal. As we navigate the open house meeting, we ask all participants for your patience. Each participant will be called in order and will be provided 10 minutes to speak. Each presenter may speak only once. If you hear your comment presented by someone else, please do not duplicate the remarks. All the comments are being recorded and will be taken into consideration. When you are called, we ask that you state your name and address. Persons addressing council shall confine their remarks to the business at hand and shall direct their comments or questions to the chair. Staff are taking notes of all the questions asked this evening. At the end of the delegations, the applicant will be asked to respond to all the questions and comments raised. If you feel that your questions have not been responded to this evening, you can email our planning department at planning@grimsby.ca. Riley McKnight will now give a presentation. Good evening, Riley.
Good evening, Mayor Jordan. Thank you very much. I will just share my screen so you can see the presentation. Okay, so as Mayor Jordan mentioned, my name is Riley McKnight and I'm a planner with the town of Grimsby. I want to thank you all for attending tonight's meeting. The applications to be discussed this evening are the proposed official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment for the property of 9 Windward Drive. Today's agenda, identified on the slide above, gives an outline of what we will be discussing. I'll provide a presentation on the planning process and briefly discuss the application received, although I will leave most of that for the applicants. And following my presentation, Oz Kamal from MHBC Planning, as well as Stacy, will be providing a presentation on that being proposed. Then finally, we will hear from any delegations and respond to questions that may arise. To explain a little further, The process tonight's meeting is to provide you with an overview of the planning process and how you can get involved, provide an overview of the policy and regulatory framework and rules and regulations that are in place. The applicant will then provide information and details regarding the proposal. Then we will answer any questions and gather feedback. So, why can plans or bylaws change? Under the Planning Act, authority for applicants to submit applications for development proposals that do not meet the current official plan or the zoning bylaw. The town's role is to process these applications. Official plan and zoning bylaws may only be amended if it is determined that the proposed changes comply with the overall intent of the official plan and result in the development that is compatible with the surrounding neighborhoods. Now, this slide contains a flow chart that outlines the major milestones in the planning process. And you can see here, we are currently at the public open house portion of the planning process. Leading up to this point, we held a pre-consultation meeting. This is a meeting that was held so all commenting agencies and the applicant may have open dialogue about that being proposed. This is a point in the planning process where all agencies, internal and external, outline the documents to be submitted for a formal application. Relevant agencies include, but are not limited to, the Niagara Escarpment Commission, the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, the Region of Niagara, etc. Once the applicant has prepared all materials for submission, the applicant would submit required documentation along with the fees to the town for the town to review for completion. Upon the application being deemed complete, a notice is sent out and agencies are asked for comments. The public is also permitted to provide comments at this time. Any documents related to the proposal for this property are posted on the current planning applications page at the Town of Grimsby's website. Notices for open houses and public meetings are also posted to this location. We are currently at the open house stage, which offers an introduction to the application to all of you. This open house will be followed by a public meeting, which will provide further opportunity for comments about the application. Along the way, revisions may be made to the application and concerns from any agencies, town staff, or members of the public will be looked at. Following the public meeting, if all concerns are believed to have been met, staff will prepare a recommendation report for council regarding the application. A decision on the application will be made at a future council meeting with the opportunity to appeal the decision afterwards. Now, this is an open public process, allowing for you to provide feedback. The open house provides the opportunity to give your opinion on the application, and the public meeting would be another opportunity. You can also follow the instructions identified on the slide here to provide further comment. And we'd like for you to stay informed. So to do so, you may provide your mailing address to the planning department. By doing so, you will receive notice of future meetings, information on how to obtain staff report, information regarding speaking in front of committee, should you wish to, and information on how you can appeal the decision. Now on to the proposal. So this slide includes a rendering for the site along with a summary of the project statistics. The proposed development here consists of a 10-story mixed-use building with 2 stories of underground parking and a total gross floor area of 16,223 square meters. There's a total of 101 residential units proposed. A mix of underground and surface parking would be provided, accommodating for 250 parking spaces. When evaluating an official plan amendment, a number of policies are to be considered. Under section 1.4.3 of the of the official plan, as identified here, states that it is intended of the official plan that it may only be amended with substantial evidence to justify such an amendment based on good planning. As per section 1.4.4, to determine whether an amendment is appropriate, regard shall be had to numerous sections of the official plan, including section 2.0 on the vision and municipal structures, goals, and objectives, land use categories in section 3.0, and the implementation policies found in section 9.0, among other policies. The Western Road Neighborhood Secondary Plan currently designates this property mixed-use high density, subject to an employment overlay as identified on the image here. As per section 11.3.3.2H of the Western Road Secondary Plan, it states that land subject to the employment overlay area on Schedule F shall be reserved for employment generating uses only. The applicant is not proposing to change this designation, rather amend the official plan to permit residential uses within the employment overlay. The current zoning on the property is neighborhood development. Site-specific policy 213 is also in effect on the subject property, which permits a sales and decor center for a modular home company. The existing zoning is proposed to be amended to mixed-use high density, with some site-specific modifications proposed. The proposed modifications are to permit uses additional to those permitted under the mixed-use high-density residential zone, to modify the minimum permitted front yard, interior side yard setback to an underground parking garage, minimum rear yard setback to an underground parking garage, and maximum building width. And finally, to permit a standardized parking rate for employment generating uses and residential uses, and a modified number of accessible parking spaces. And that is all I have for now, so I will pass it back to you, Mayor Jordan. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Riley. Up next, we'll have Oz Kamal and Stacy Karaskowski. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. Members of Council, my name is Oz Kamal from MHBC Planning, and I'm joined today with a few members from our team, which I'll go through in just shortly. I'll just want to share my screen. Oh, great. Who's controlling the presentation? Well, do I just say next slide and then it'll go to the next slide?
Yeah, just say next slide and I'll switch.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Riley. As I was saying, my name is Oz Kamal. I'm a partner at MHBC Planning. I'm joined today with one of our senior planners from MHBC, Stacy Kurzakowski. I also have the owners of the property here, Justin and Anthony Real. And I'm also joined today by Magnus Clark, project architect from Paradigm Architecture and Design, as well as Aaron Wignall from Crozier Consulting Engineers, who's the traffic consultant on this file. Next slide, please. In terms of our agenda today, what we're going to do is talk about the site's location within the town, give an overview of this area context. What we're also going to do is highlight some of the immediately surrounding developments that are either built or recently approved. And then we're going to provide an overview of the proposed development, outline the list of studies that were required and submitted in support of this application, detail the proposed amendments to the official plan and zoning, show you some conceptual renderings of the proposed development, and then provide an opportunity for members of council and the public to ask questions and provide comments on the proposed development. Next slide, please. As Riley already had pointed out, subject site is located north of the QEW, west of the Casablanca interchange. The site is approximately 1.43 acres in size with 90 meters of frontage on Windward Drive. The land is currently vacant, but was previously used for a model home sales center, which were removed in September of 2022. Next slide, please. This is just a slide showing the subject lands in red, and then just some surrounding area context. So as you can see, there's a variety of uses, and the area is undergoing significant growth and transformation. So to the north, opposite Windward Drive, there's a mixed-use development currently under construction, which we'll talk about in a little bit. To the east, abutting the subject lands, is a 4-story hotel, and beyond that is an office building and some new residential development. To the south is the QEW, and beyond that, there are commercial and employment uses such as car dealerships and industrial buildings. And to the west of us, abutting the subject lands, is a 1-story commercial plaza with convenience-type restaurants and lower density residential and mixed-use development opposite North Service Road. Next slide, please. So as I had briefly mentioned, the surrounding area is undergoing a significant amount of change, and it is an area identified for growth within the town. Immediately surrounding the site are 3 recently approved or constructed developments as follows. The number 1, this is for Windward Drive, slightly northwest of the subject lands. This development was approved in 2021 and contains 2 mixed-use podium-style buildings, 12 and 19 stories, with townhouse units as well, and permissions for hotel and commercial uses. The number 2 represents 10 Windward Drive and is located directly opposite the subject site and is currently nearing completion. This development contains 1 20-story residential building with 206 units plus 27 townhouses along the perimeter of the site with some ground floor commercial uses. The number 3, that's 13 Windward Drive, and that's just east of the subject lands. It is fully built out. The development consists of a 5-story office building abutting the QEW and 3 residential buildings ranging in height from 4 to 10 stories. Next slide, please. Now we're going to just do a proposal overview, slightly different than what Riley had gone through. So the application we've submitted here proposes a 10-story mixed-use building with 121 residential units and just under 2,000 square meters of employment commercial units on the first 2 floors, with a total lot coverage of 45%. The setbacks to the portion of the building at grade are 1.03 meters from the front yard abutting Windward Drive, 7.88 meters from the rear yard abutting the QEW, excluding that 14-meter setback, which you can see there, the line showing the MTO setback, and then 10 meters for the interior side yards. So in order to accommodate the below grade parking structure, reductions to those setbacks are being sought and will be discussed shortly. Next slide, please. Due to the property's adjacency to the QEW, a 14-meter MTO setback is required along the rear property line, which is on the south side of the page there. No structures or required parking spaces are permitted within this area. Parking will be contained in 2 levels of below grade parking, as well as some surface level parking along the sides and rear of the building. So a total of 250 contributing parking spaces are proposed, including 12 accessible spaces, as well as 57 bicycle parking spaces. There will be a total of 58 parking spaces, 29 contributing spaces, 7 of which are accessible, and there will be 29 additional non-contributing spaces with 2 accessible parking spaces within them, located along the rear of the property abutting the QEW. These spaces are non-contributing spaces as they are located within the MTO's 14-meter setback. So while we're allowed to have them to service the development, they can't be part of the required parking that's provided for the development. Next slide, please. As part of the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment, the following studies were prepared and submitted in support of the application. A planning justification report, a tree preservation plan and arborist report, shadow study, urban design brief, functional servicing report, transportation impact study, noise impact study, a phase 1 environmental site assessment, and a stage 1-2 archaeological assessment. All of these studies are available on the town's website. Next slide, please. The subject lands are designated as residential mixed-use area within the town's parent official plan, which permits the proposed development as a mixed-use development. The subject lands also fall within the Winston Road Neighborhood Secondary Plan, which designates it as mixed-use high density and permits a variety of uses and built form, including mixed-use buildings. In addition to the mixed-use high-density designation, the secondary plan also identifies an employment overlay on the lands immediately abutting the QEW, as shown in the blue hatching on the lower image. As Riley had pointed out, policy 11.3.3.2H of the Winston Road Neighborhood Secondary Plan reserves the land for employment-generating uses. As a result, an official plan amendment is being sought to allow for residential uses within the employment overlay, while still providing the 1,926 square meters of GFA dedicated to employment and commercial uses on the first 2 floors. Next slide, please. The lands are subject to the town's zoning bylaw 14-45, which zones the lands as neighborhood development, which does not permit the development as proposed. Neighborhood development zone recognizes the existing use on the land, which was a model home sales. The zoning bylaw amendment has been requested to amend the site-specific zoning to align with the official plan and thus zone it to mixed-use high density with site-specific provisions. Within the mixed-use high-density zone, a variety of uses, including residential, commercial, and prestige employment uses are permitted. In order to ensure long-term viability of the employment and commercial uses, the following additional uses have been requested: accessory showroom, clinic, convenience store up to a max of 5,000 square feet, fitness studio, a small food store up to 5,000 square feet, and a pharmacy. Next slide, please. So in addition to the additional uses, 6 site-specific zoning provisions have been applied for in order to accommodate the proposed mixed-use development. The first is a minimum front yard setback from 2 meters to 1 meter to accommodate the architectural pillars located along the front facade at Windward. These pillars have been incorporated to enhance the facade and streetscape of Windward Drive. The remainder of the building will be set back from the pillars to create depth and canopied entranceways. The next zoning adjustment we've asked for is a reduction in the minimum interior side yard setback from 4.5 meters to 0.8 meters to accommodate the below grade parking structure. This reduction is required to achieve an acceptable floor plate due to the loss of site area as a result of the 14-meter MTO setback at the rear of the property. This reduction will not be visible above ground, and the building will be set back over 9 meters from the side lot lines, well exceeding the minimum required setback. The next provision that we requested was a minimum rear yard setback from 7.5 meters to 2 meters to accommodate the below grade structure. Similar to the interior side yard, the reduction at the rear yard is to accommodate the below grade structure only. So this reduction is taking into account the MTO's 14-meter setback. Visually, the building will be set back approximately 21 meters from the rear lot line and 7.88 meters from the MTO setback. The next provision that we had requested an adjustment to is the maximum building width from 60 meters to 72 meters to account for the reduction in usable lot area as a result of the MTO's 14-meter setback at the rear of the property. The streetscape facade will be architecturally enhanced through fenestration and stepbacks to minimize the overall impact on the street. The next thing that we are asking for is a standardized parking rate of 1 parking space per 28 square meters of GFA dedicated to employment and commercial uses, and 1.5 spaces per residential unit inclusive of visitor parking spaces. The amendment will ensure that regardless of the use, a consistent rate will be provided for this development. An additional 29 non-contributing spaces are located in the MTO setback at the rear of the lot and will ensure ample parking is on site. The last thing that we've asked for is a reduction in the required number of accessible parking spaces from 13 to 12. And this is because we have 2 additional accessible parking spaces at the rear of the site within the MTO's required setback. So we're essentially providing 14 when you factor in those parking provisions, those parking spaces But because of the because you can't use the parking within the MTO setback as required parking, we requested a slight adjustment from 13 to 12. Next slide, please. These are two conceptual renderings of the proposed development. The above view is taken from Windward Drive, and then the one to the left is taken from the southeast portion of the site. You can see along Windward Drive, we're proposing some enhanced streetscaping with trees and landscaping, and the idea is to have some pedestrian activity, smaller shops along Windward Drive. And then you can also see in the rendering that there is proposed to have parking along the sides and the rear of the building outside of the MTO setback, which was also shown in that floor plan that was shown earlier. Next slide, please. At this time, we'd welcome any questions or comments from the public on the proposed development or on the information presented tonight. As Riley pointed out, there are no decisions being made tonight. If we can't answer the question, we will take it back and make sure that it is addressed through our subsequent resubmission. Next slide, please. And just wanted to say thank you for attending tonight's public open house, and we will have future public meetings scheduled for the proposed development at a time and date to be determined. Should you have any questions or comments, please contact myself or Stacy from our office at the email addresses indicated on the screen. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation, Oz. I don't think there are any delegates from the public tonight. Questions or comments from council? Councillor Bradzi.
Thank you, Mayor, through you. Oz, Anthony, how's it going? I'm just going to be kind of a rehash of our previous meeting and kind of already know the question coming, so it might be a softball one, but just looking at the overall floor space dedicated between residential and commercial, with it being mixed use, I think 8% dedicated to commercials, slightly low. Would appreciate if you could look at increasing that by any means. Just kind of looking out for Grimsby's tax revenue. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor DeFlavio.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I don't know if Ms. McKnight can answer this. So slide 10 of staff's presentation talked about the current permitted uses. So I'm just trying to understand. So I don't understand what an employment overlay is. So is this employment land, and the proposal is to change the zoning to allow for residential, or is residential currently allowed on this site? And then I have other questions.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your question, Councillor. The current designation of the property under the secondary plan is mixed use high density, but there is an employment overlay over top of that designation. So the mixed use high density does permit residential and commercial employment uses. However, the employment overlay does restrict all uses to be employment generating only. So the proposal by the applicant is to permit residential uses over the employment overlay on the subject plans. Thank you.
I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be facetious. I genuinely don't understand. So it's mixed use. Mixed use means that there can be both residential and employment? No.
Yes, I'll share the slide that you're speaking to here again. Maybe that will help clarify things as well. Okay, so as you can, sorry, are you able to see that?
No, we're not able to see that. So. You're at the end of the presentation, so you might have to scroll up or use the arrow up on your...
Okay. So as you can see, the star is where the subject lands are located, and there is a red color, which is the mixed-use high-density designation. However, the blue crosses over top of that are the employment overlay. So there are select lands that an employment overlay has been applied to reserve that space for employment generating uses only. So at the current time, only employment generating uses are permitted on those lands.
Okay. So currently there's residential is not permitted on this site then?
That is correct.
Okay. So if it were employment land, what would be the expectation as far as, square footage? I guess it would be based on whatever a proposal came forward, right? There wouldn't be like a minimum square footage requirement for that employment land. It would be, somebody could propose a 2-story or a 3-story or a 1-story employment use there, and we'd have to look at that application for what it was. We don't have something that says there should be a 4-story building here, for example, for employment. It just says there has to be some employment use. Is that correct?
Yes, so through you, Chair, there are a few more specific requirements pertaining to the employment overlay area, but the general takeaway is that it should be reserved for only employment uses.
Okay, so is the intent of the employment reserve to ensure that we have employment land? I mean, that's the intent, right, is to make sure that there is some employment, that it is used for employment land. Would the mixed use be or this dual use be in keeping with the spirit of what we want there? I'm just trying to understand. Or do we want, or is it supposed to be just employment? Maybe Mr. Basic can answer that.
Walter, can you?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chair. Again, the red area that you see there, which also includes the fifth wheel site on the east side of Casablanca Boulevard, and it also includes, as you see, the employment overlay designation over the Aqua Blue and Aqua Azul site abutting the interchange there is slightly changed. So the goal is the goal was to establish the overlay designation in this as a special policy within the mixed-use high-density area to ensure that a minimum amount of employment floor space is provided along that area. So we were anticipating a certain amount of floor space. In the Aqua Blue and Aqua Azul site where the office building was built, I forget, 13 Windward Drive, that the amount of floor space there, 60,000 square feet, was a result of sort of a design exercise or a calculation of, how much, what a reasonable amount of floor space would be for that area that was on which the overlay designation is applied to. On the fifth wheel truck stop site, the calculation there was approximately 75,000 square feet. So we have a specific site-specific official plan policy, as you recall, that the employment area must generate, or the overlay area must generate a minimum 75,000 square feet of employment floor space or employment generating floor space. So following the same protocol, the intent in this particular case is that a minimum amount of floor space, employment generating floor space is provided on the site. The actual amount, maybe Mr. Kamal can provide some of the details on how they arrived at the number that that they did arrive at. But again, our goal is of that designation was to provide a minimum amount and a specified minimum amount of employment generating floor space along that strip abutting the Queen Elizabeth Way. In the similar way along Winston Road, we have an overlay there. It's called Downtown Main Street Overlay, where certain types of uses are appropriate and where a certain design requirement has to be implemented along that stretch of the road. Okay. So, but overall, it is a mixed-use high-density area, and it was the implementation of these overlay designations was done after the official plan was adopted to approve the secondary plan. So this was a later study that was done by the town to implement these requirements.
Thank you. So maybe, sorry, through you, Mr. Mayor, maybe Mr. Kamal might be able to answer that, or maybe that's a question that can be brought back if we don't have that answer, but I would like to know how this compares as a square footage of commercial to overall design in the, like as a ratio, how it compares to the other ones that have been recently approved down there, if it's a similar ratio. So you mentioned 75,000 square feet for the fifth wheel and 60,000 for the Aqua Blue, Aqua Azul site. Is that what, was it square feet or square meters? And then I'd just like to know how that compares to what's being proposed here, because that way we could say, yes, this is a pretty balanced approach to what we've already permitted down there, or no, this is not nearly enough considering what has been required in other sites. I'd like to have that comparator if possible.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it's 60,000 square feet and 75,000 square feet respectively.
So if Mr. Kamal, I don't know if you have that answer, and if not, if you could bring it back for future meetings.
Yeah, through your worship, what I can say is this is a much smaller site than those other sites as one thing. And what we did is we looked at the site initially, understanding the mixed-use high-density designation with an employment overlay, and thinking about it from the perspective of, okay, if this was strictly employment, we would be required X amount of parking, and then we did the exercise of trying to figure out, maxing out the site, meeting the setbacks, how much GFA could we deploy on the site using a very simple rectangular box, not getting crazy with the shapes, and providing the adequate amount of parking. And what we figured out was that number was 1,926 square meters, basically a two-story employment generator, which would be, again, a mix of commercial and employment uses. And so we took that and made sure that our project, as proposed, had that minimum amount of employment. So the employment generating portion of it would meet what you would have normally had if you were to come in with just an employment use. Because if it was just an employment use, you'd be required to provide parking. And so what we did is we figured out how much parking could we provide, not including the MTO area, of course. And the total amount provided is about 21,000 square feet, or 1926 square meters. So we just made sure that our proposal was in keeping with the employment overlay, in that we're generating the number of jobs that you would have normally generated if it was a standard just employment proposal, and also meeting the intent of the mixed use high density, which I do want to point out would allow up to 12 stories, but we're only proposing 10. Again, to try to help balance.
Councillor DeFlavio.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. So, okay, thank you for that clarification. I would like to see a comparator, though, when we get to that stage of how this compares. It may be significantly more as a percentage than other sites. I just like to see that it's, so if that's something we can have in the future. Other questions. The presentation mentions one spot per 28 square meters for the commercial component of this, or the employment component of this site. How does that compare to our normal? I mean, I know that different uses have different requirements for parking. Is this kind of finding an average so that way it's flexible? Is that the purpose of the 1 per 28 square meters?
That's exactly it. And what we're trying to do is make sure that we're providing an adequate amount of parking for a variety of non-residential uses, because we don't know who's going to come in, right? Because we don't have tenants yet. So what we're trying to do is find an appropriate balance of parking. And through Crozier's, they helped us establish a balanced rate of 1 space per 28 for the non-residential.
Thank you. Okay, so I would like to also see what would be required based on the specific uses on that site, and if it meets that, or if it's less or more, because I don't know if 1 spot per 28 square meters is good, or that's really great, or that's terrible, because I don't know what our normal one is. So being able to compare that would be beneficial for us in our decision-making process, I think. And is 1.5 spots per residential unit the full requirement? That's because, is it 1.25 plus 0.25 visitor? So that is just making a general 1.5. Okay, so you're nodding yes, so I'm going to say that's yes. The last question I had was regarding parkland. It's mentioned in the presentation. Would it be cash in lieu? It mentions the parkland should be the waterfront and all this, so it would be cash in lieu based on the density and the final value of the proposal. Is that how that works?
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Sorry.
That's okay. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, typically we take land where we've planned for parkland. In this particular neighborhood, we've planned for parkland to be acquired along the waterfront. So that's the focus of the land acquisition for parkland. The official plan specifically states that where anywhere else within the neighborhood where we're not proposing to take land, we will be taking cash, which is this site specifically.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any further questions from council? Seeing none. Oh, Councillor Sharwal.
Through Mayor Jordan, thank you. Can we see a slide of the front of the building again? You kind of went really quickly on that. And then if there's anything that kind of shows the road a little bit more.
Just bear with me for a moment. I'll share my screen here.
Okay, yeah.
So our covering page shows how the site would look from Windward Drive.
Yeah, I was hoping that we'd have something a little bit more fulsome, because you can't really see the road here. And it's like, I can't quite picture it with context with everything around it. So my one concern is just getting in and out with the fire trucks, if that was ever an issue, and just parking with the surrounding areas, getting in and out of the building, and also the other buildings being able to get in and out of their own parking lots as well. What else was I going to ask here? Oh, Riley, if you could just expand on, you started to get into the employment overlay, and you said that there were like specific uses, and I know Walter kind of went over, but is there anything else that you had to add there, that there were specific uses for that employment overlay? I don't understand employment overlay all that well either, so just anything you can offer would be great.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. So we do have a list of permitted uses within the mixed-use high-density designation, and with the employment overlay, permits only select uses from that list. So I unfortunately don't have it up quite at the moment, but I can share that with you following this meeting today. And from a larger list of uses permitted in the mixed use designation, only a few select of those would be permitted within the employment overlay area.
Yes, if you could please give that to us, that would be great. And more information is better. So that'd be great. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments from council? Seeing none, thank you for your participation in the open house. The consultants and staff will take back your feedback. Please contact staff at planning@grimsby.ca if you have any additional comments or questions about the proposal after this evening. Thank you, everyone, for coming out. Everyone have a good evening and drive home safely. Good night.
Good night.